Welcome back to Beyond Binary, where we decode the facts behind the world's biggest stories, not just what's happening, but why it matters. Today we're diving deep into one of the most critical turning points of 2025, the Hamas-Israel Peace Treaty, Phase 1. It's being called a historic step, a fragile truce, and a diplomatic experiment. But what does it really mean? How did we get here? And what lessons does it carry for the world of technology, governance, and geopolitics? Let's break it down. For decades, the Israel-Palestine conflict has been a cycle of violence, retaliation, and fragile ceasefires. Every few years, hope flickers, then fades. But this time, things are different. Phase 1 of the Hamas-Israel Peace Treaty, signed in early October 2025, could mark the beginning of a long-awaited shift. Under this first phase, both sides agreed to a mutual ceasefire. Israeli troops will withdraw from central Gaza, while Hamas commits to releasing hostages taken during the conflict. In return, Israel will release hundreds of Palestinian prisoners and allow humanitarian aid to flow freely into Gaza for the first time in months. It's not the end of the war, but it's the first tangible step toward ending it. Now, before we look ahead, let's rewind, because this peace didn't appear out of thin air. It came after one of the harshest shutdowns the region has seen. So what exactly is a shutdown in this context? A shutdown, sometimes called a lockdown or blockade, is when movement, trade, communication, and access to resources are completely restricted. In Gaza, that means sealed borders, halted power grids, limited internet, and no access to goods or fuel. Think of it as a total system freeze, not just physical but digital and economic. The last shutdown, just months before this peace deal, was devastating. Entire cities went dark, hospitals ran on backup power, fuel ran dry, and civilians were trapped. Supplies of food and medicine were nearly exhausted. Aid convoys were blocked at checkpoints. And while all this happened, communication blackouts cut off Gaza from the rest of the world. Why did this shutdown happen? It was triggered by escalating attacks, rocket launches from Gaza, Israeli airstrikes in response, and an intelligence failure that led to heavy casualties on both sides. The Israeli government, citing national security, tightened its blockade, sealing the borders. Hamas retaliated with more attacks, and the spiral of violence deepened. Shutdowns like this are often used as tools of control, a way to pressure opponents, weaken their supply lines, or push them to negotiate. But the real victims are always civilians, ordinary people caught between walls, both literal and political. The effects of such shutdowns go beyond the obvious humanitarian crisis. They ripple through every system. Power and water networks collapse. Hospitals lose resources. Schools close indefinitely. Internet blackouts fuel misinformation. And psychologically, a generation grows up under siege, angry, disconnected, and hopeless. It was precisely this desperation that created the conditions for diplomacy. By mid-2025, both sides were exhausted. The conflict had drained economies, fractured societies, and pushed even allies to demand peace. Enter the mediators: the United States, Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey, each with different stakes, each pushing for what's now known as Phase 1 of the Peace Treaty. So what does Phase 1 include? Let's unpack it. First, the ceasefire. All military operations are to halt immediately. This gives space for aid convoys to enter and civilians to return to their homes. Second, hostage exchanges. Hamas will release Israeli hostages, including civilians and foreign nationals, while Israel will free hundreds of Palestinian detainees. Third, territorial repositioning. Israeli forces will pull back from major population centers in Gaza, though not entirely from the border zones, a cautious step toward de-escalation. Fourth, humanitarian access. International organizations can now bring in medicine, food, and clean water under UN supervision. And finally, digital reopening. Communication networks and the internet will be restored in Gaza, monitored to prevent misuse but crucial for reconnecting families and infrastructure. This marks a huge shift from the darkness of the shutdown months. But peace, as history shows, is never linear. Let's talk about why this treaty matters and what could still go wrong. The first insight is that hostage diplomacy works only when both sides trust verification systems. That's why global agencies and AI-based satellite monitoring are being used to track compliance in real time. Yes, peace now has data verification protocols. Second, the withdrawal zones are mapped using smart border sensors and aerial drones. These systems track whether troops stay within agreed boundaries. Third, aid movement is being managed via blockchain-based tracking to prevent diversion or corruption. Every crate of food and medicine is logged, transparent, traceable. Fourth, this phase is as much a psychological test as a political one. Can two sides conditioned for decades of hostility actually cooperate? And fifth, the biggest risk, collapse through misinformation. Already social media is buzzing with fake reports and manipulated videos. In this treaty, controlling digital narratives is as important as controlling borders. Now for the bigger picture. The Gaza shutdown wasn't just a humanitarian crisis, it was a systems failure. Power grids, communications, logistics, all collapsed together. It revealed how fragile modern conflict zones are when infrastructure becomes a weapon. That's why this peace process is not only political, it's technological. Phase 1 relies on digital monitoring, encrypted communication between negotiators, and AI systems verifying ceasefire conditions. The same tech that once amplified war is now being used to secure peace. But what about the future phases? If Phase 1 holds, Phase 2 will focus on disarmament, governance reform, and reconstruction. That means rebuilding schools, hospitals, and power grids with international aid. Phase 3 could eventually define Gaza's political status, whether it remains autonomous, federated, or something entirely new. Yet, everything depends on the next few weeks. If any side breaks the ceasefire, this fragile structure could crumble. The shutdown mechanisms, border closures, airstrikes, embargoes, could return overnight. That's the haunting truth. Peace in this region has always existed on a knife's edge. For now, though, the world is watching something extraordinary. Two sides that have spent decades locked in conflict, signing an agreement to pause, breathe, and try again. This isn't just politics. It's about human systems learning to reboot after a catastrophic failure. At Beyond Binary, we see this as a living example of how interconnected our world has become. Wars are no longer fought only on land. They unfold in data networks, supply chains, and media narratives. And peace, too, will be coded in the same language. So as this treaty unfolds, remember, peace isn't a moment, it's a mechanism. It has to be designed, maintained, and debugged, like any complex system. If this fragile Phase 1 holds, it could become a template for future diplomacy, where technology, transparency, and humanity finally converge. The next few weeks will decide whether this is the beginning of lasting peace or just another pause before the next shutdown. Thanks for watching Beyond Binary. If you found this deep dive informative, hit like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more analyses where technology meets reality. Because understanding the systems behind world events isn't just knowledge, it's the first step toward changing them.